All right. Hello there. And thank you for joining us here on Lions Guide. And I know a number of you folks out there that listen to this show and have followed me and the Lions Guide team journey are entrepreneurs and business owners. And so I'm excited to have Tim Calise, who helps growing tech-enabled service businesses, scale from being, inconsistent in their income and grow it to a valuable exit. This is a topic of conversation I have with a number of clients of Lions Guide. Often they are business owners. And, we kind of run into this point where we aren't sure what the plan is. So excited to talk about that today. So if this is your first time joining us, I'm Dale. I'm founder of Lions Guide, and we're here to empower business owners, executives, and everyday people like you to be world-class leaders. And on the show, what we do is we set out to explore the stories of our guests and the lessons they've learned, and so that you might learn those lessons as well. So today, Tim, welcome. How you doing, my friend?
Doing very well. Thank you for having me on the show. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, likewise. So tell us a little bit, the 30-second drill, who you are and what do you do?
My name is Tim Calise. I am a business consultant and coach, an investor in growing service-based businesses, primarily helping those folks that dream to go from $500,000, $250,000 a year in revenue up to that magical kind of 3 to 5 million range where the world kind of opens up, and doing it in a way as a father of 3 kids, in a way that takes advantage of all the leverage points that are available to us, so that we can get the most out of each and every day, and all of our hard-earned efforts to make it worthwhile, all in the end. So that's what I've done for the last 20 years, and help new folks along the way.
So what does it mean then? Because, again, I know what you're talking about, that spot where you're in this grind and you're putting in the 60-hour weeks and you're like not sure if it's worth it. And then you said something where you get up to that 3 to 5 million mark and everything opens up. Like, what does that mean? What are we looking at there?
Yeah. So I think for anyone who's ever started a business or is in the process of trying to scale a business, it's like getting a boulder moving. The first kind of part of the journey is really kind of the hardest part, the 0 to kind of $100,000, $200,000 a year. It's really lonely and it's kind of hard to kind of start to get your feet underneath you. But what I found, and the reason why I love working with the folks that I do, is because they have an existing kind of artifact, a piece of art that they're trying to mold and create into something that they have the vision of, and so I love kind of helping them take that, refine it, and as I said, it's not just work more, grind more. If you're doing 40-hour weeks, if you only did 80 or 100-hour weeks, things would be different. It's quite frankly just doing it in a different way, where we order the things that need to be done, where we can get the most bang for our buck each and every day, each week, each quarter, etc. But once you get to that kind of $3 million, the 1 million is first. That opens up a whole nother kind of window of ability to just be able to buy back the things that you either are not phenomenal at, or just is not the best use of your time. And then once you hit 3 million, kind of everything breaks again. And then from there, we kind of reinvent the business in a way that can get us from 3 to 5 or 10 or something like that. So there's an old fable or a rule of thumb that the 1s and 3s are where everything breaks. So once you get up to 1 million, things change. Once you get to 3, things change, and then again until you hit 10 million. So it's just that beginning part of the market is where I absolutely love working with folks that are in that stage of their careers.
So tell me then about your background. Like, how did you get into all this? Where do you hail from? What do you do? I mean, as far as you getting here, where did you come from to get here?
Yeah, so I grew up in a family of, my dad was actually in the banking industry, in the finance industry, and I think when I started, my earliest memories of kind of school was thinking that there was a path or a way that this life is supposed to go, and I never felt like that fit me exactly. I was kind of the kid that was always taking things apart and putting them back together again, and kind of always has this kind of creative entrepreneurial streak in me. And so I chose, quite frankly, a different path to get to where I wanted to go. And so went to school for business and finance and things like that. Ended up around 2004 in the hedge fund industry, where Before the age of 24, I raised $350 million for a hedge fund that I had basically helped grow from very small stages up to fairly large. And then from there, actually gave it all back. So part of my journey is, kind of doing the blood, sweat, tears, sacrifice to build something, and then having the moral requirement to effectively undo it all under the banner of it was the right thing to do. Took my leave from there. Ended up taking the next step in technology and fitness, in a technology-driven fitness concept. And then that led me to an introduction to the folks over at GymLaunch, Alex and Leila Hormozi, a phenomenal couple that co-founded that business. And I ended up coming on board at GymLaunch a couple of years ago, grew from $0 to $50 million collectively a year. And then we sold that business a couple of years ago. And now kind of taking that last 15 or 20 years of experience in a bunch of different areas, and helping the next crop of business owners in their endeavors.
So what do you see business owners really struggle with the most? Like what's the number one thing that's kind of like to them probably feels like it's only them, but really a lot of business owners that you're working with are kind of struggling with that?
Yeah, I see some commonalities around, the idea of competition is a popular one. So how do I stand out in my market? And I think when you're early in the process, it feels like I just need to do more. And I think one of the things that I've realized after, the last couple of decades is it's actually doing less and ending up with doing more of the right things for you, and having the wherewithal to really think through, how can I stand out in the market through my product, through my positioning. There's a famous book, the Red Ocean, Blue Ocean, or Blue Ocean Strategy is the name of the book. And the red ocean is red with competition. And I try to encourage everyone that I work with, how can we do blue ocean thinking? What category can we create? Where is the space in the marketplace where there isn't that cutthroat competition? And once you can kind of see it that way, that change in lens, you actually stop doing more of the same and more of the right things.
Yeah. And are you saying when you say do less rather than more, are you talking about like when
Yeah.
business owners like, oh, well, Joe's shop's doing that, so we should do that. And Sally's shop's doing this, so we should try that too, instead of just like sticking with what's working for them type of thing. Is that what we're saying?
Yeah, absolutely. And then even just some basic things like if you think about marketing right now, if you try to be on every channel in every way, in every marketplace, you just spread yourself so thin and that you really can't be. You're an inch wide or a mile wide and an inch deep. And in some cases, it actually
Mhm.
makes sense to say, instead of let's put 10 products to market at the same time, what's the one? Let's start there, and then we learn and things like that. So I'm a big believer in given some time in the technology industry, the idea of a kind of an iterative process. So like, what is the smallest step we can take to prove out our thinking, to find out where the market is, instead of just trying to kind of sit behind a screen or proverbially and do all the thinking and try to do it all. I'm a big believer in those kind of small steps.
Yeah, it's something I used to tell folks, in running Corsica, like you would have people come in all the time and they would go, well, I saw so-and-so was running an ad on this or doing whatever. And my response to that was like, look, what you focus on expands, right? So if you focus on competition, you're just going to see more competition, right?
Mhm.
And all you do is, I was like, just focus on prospects, right? Focus on our clients,
Yep.
focus on our existing client wins, and what because certainly that you can find like when you're solving new problems for existing clients, that's really to me was always telling you like what the market is calling for. Like when your existing clients go, hey, I've got a problem here, can you fix it? And you go, actually, yeah, I think we can.
Yeah.
That's a pivot point, right? Like you can't
Yeah.
chase every, squirrel that crossed your path, but you got to kind of analyze it instead of being an automatic no or automatic yes, maybe see like, hey, this is a trend that, my client base might need of me, right? Or you might see where other parts of the market are failing. I end up getting into VoIP because we just couldn't recommend a good vendor. Like they were all just
Mhm.
flopping. And we were like, man, okay, well, I guess if our clients need it and we need someone to do it well and we can't outsource it, I guess we got to get into this. So it's
Yeah.
there is some dichotomy there, but I'm with you. Like, social media you were mentioning, like you can get in the rabbit hole of social media for the sake of social media, right? And I've worked with a different VAs and different marketing firms. I'm like, I tell them out of the gate, like, look, I'm not doing social media for the sake of social media. You know, I'm trying to do it strategically where we can do it to provide value and help clients find us. But man, I'm not doing dances on TikTok for the sake of saying checking a box, man. I can't, I'm not doing it. And so I definitely honor what you're saying. And like, even with social media platform, like find where your clients or prospects are playing and go get good there before you find yourself trying to produce for 8 different channels all at one time. You drive yourself crazy. You know?
Yeah, absolutely. And you bring up a really good point. I'm most of this, I work primarily with service-based businesses. And I think today and going forward, the idea of kind of relationship-based business is going to become, it's a big deal now. And I think it will be even more important going forward. So that kind of relationship begets this recurring revenue component. So what problems can I solve over time? Since I've spent some time in fitness, that's the idea of, gym owners primarily don't open a gym just for the sake of the gym. They're there because they want to do the right thing and transform lives and have an impact. Well, if you just open a gym, there's actually 3 core components to kind of that transformation process, right? There's the workouts and the movement component, then there's nutrition, and there's kind of the accountability piece that a lot of people are seeking. So again, how I think about that is, you could say, well, I have to be an expert nutritionist. I have to do all of these things all at the same time. Well, it's like, well, what is the smallest step we can take? Can you bring a nutritionist in and do a monthly seminar as a first step? If you get some enrollment, okay, well, now we're moving in the right direction. That's validation. You know what I mean? Instead of taking on this idea of I have to build it all and build it all at once. You can have the grand vision, build the full bridge, but then thinking about kind of at this point in time, which one of these things makes the most sense? What's the easiest thing, or the most profitable thing, the highest margin thing that we can focus on to help drive the business forward? And then we can make decisions going forward thereafter on how we actually want to pull that off. So whether it be a joint venture, whether it be building it out internally, whether it be, with a background in software, you can appreciate, do we build it in house or do we go and buy it? The build and buy idea. So there's lots of things out there, and I think just understanding where the market is and where your customers are, I think is a really good point.
Yeah. So how important is the quality of the leadership to the success of an organization, right? I've seen, businesses get started, and there's a great book by Michael Gerber called The E-Myth, right? That talks about like you're a baker, but the minute you open that bakery, like you're a business owner, right? So just being a good baker isn't enough. You've got to learn how to be a business owner. And to me, that's when they start to get into this area that maybe just as that quote unquote baker or that tradesman in some way, they've not been faced with the demands of leadership before. What's been your kind of experience with like the good, the bad, the toxic of leadership in organizations, and how that attributes to, the success or not?
Yeah, so I'll speak for myself. So I've built and founded about half a dozen companies over the last 20 years, and so I think earlier in my career, I did kind of ownership or leadership almost by abdication. It was, let's hire people to do the things that I either didn't want to do or just couldn't be bothered to do, or things like that. I don't think I led them. I think it was, I kind of offloaded in a haphazard way the things that were on my plate. And so I find that analogy or that kind of story to be quite consistent with a lot of people. They don't actually do leadership in the quote unquote the authentic way. It's more of like, what's in it for me. As I've evolved, leadership for me today, and you brought up E-Myth, and I think that's a great analogy. The E-Myth kind of concept is, over time you're a craftsman or a practitioner, and over time you almost become it's almost wrung out of you. So if you're a baker, you end up outsourcing all the baking, and then you're left with kind of everything else is left. I was recently reading a book by Dan Martell of SaaS Academy. He recently wrote a book called Buy Back Your Time. And so that's been rephrased in my mind, which is, I want to build a business so that I can bring on folks who can take over the things that are outside of my area of genius. So, for example, in that baking analogy, like if baking is the thing that I just love doing, getting up in the morning, then that should be the last thing that you give up. You might have to outsource everything else. And I think we sit at an interesting time. I know someone who's very, very strong on content creation right now. And he said, almost the opposite of where the E-Myth book was. He's like, I'll outsource the business before I outsource content. And I think as we sit today, it's a really interesting time, because I think leadership is understanding where you are strongest and bringing in people not to their detriment, but also, in an ideal world, you stay in your zone of genius and you find other people to take on the things that are outside of yours that happen to be in their zone of genius. So that's for me what it looks like, in continuing to kind of put that North Star out there, and get the right people on the bus, if you will.
Yeah, definitely. What about the demands of business ownership? I mean, do you see people like need to kind of level up to kind of meet the demands that maybe they do, maybe they don't know what's coming at them? Like, 'cause I've always felt like, like you said earlier, I think like the first couple of years, it's pretty almost cliche, right? Like it's so much work, and the need to kind of persevere through that, do you ever come across clients that they're just in it and they've got to level up, right? It's not necessarily the business, and the opportunity there is great, but they've got to kind of rise to meet those demands.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the business can only grow to the level of your traits and your beliefs.
Mm.
So if the business is not where you want it to be, that's because of something inherent in the leadership. So, the idea of it, is a skill issue. Is it something that you don't know how to do? And I, there's a lot to be said for thinking about, what do I need to know versus who do I need to know? And so I think for folks that are just starting or are trying to think through how do I avoid some of those pitfalls, find a mentor who's been there and help guide you through those things, right? So, and they can also, you almost can't self-diagnose in some cases, where the sticking points are. I've got a great mentor who in 30 seconds can tell me everything that if I sat here for 3 days, I would never see, right? You just can't see those things. And that perspective is hugely important. So finding someone with expertise and the point of view that can that you can be shown some of those things that you might be lacking, I think is really important. But yeah.
So what would you think kind of in your last 2 decades of service and the finance or building these businesses or funding them, whatever, like what do you think has been your biggest challenge that you've had to overcome?
So for me, as I alluded to earlier, I skew more towards the kind of highly sensitive person rather than the gladiator in a traditional sense. And I think I struggled personally with the identity of like trying to wear the suit that didn't fit. I always had grit. I always had determination. I always had a belief in myself, but it wasn't in the machismo kind of way. It was like I cared so deeply about the customers that I had, the partners that I had, and it treated me incredibly well. But I think that the mental kind of challenge of aligning those things, and again, thinking that there was a right way to do something, and if it didn't align with how I felt, feeling like that was to my detriment, like it was a liability. Once I made that switch and said, I'm going to double down not on on my strengths as far as what I'm good at, but also who I am. I think things really started to feel better for me during that time. But I've built businesses, I've had them fail, raised hundreds of millions of dollars, and then had to give it all back. I remember my wife and I started a gym franchise, or we're gym franchisees, and I made the stupid mistakes of just kind of going all in. And I remember one day laying in bed, staring at the ceiling, going, "If this doesn't work, we're screwed." And I have no idea, And so but those are those times that, right, you kind of see who you are. But the challenges of bringing a vision, or bringing something, kind of to fruition, has always been both exciting and challenging all at the same time.
So when you talk about, because you mentioned a couple of times, like raising a few $1 million and having to give it back, like what do you mean you had to give it back?
Yeah. So I started our fund. We grew from 2004 to 2007, and for anyone who was either around or invested in the stock market in 2008, it was obviously the stock market crashed in the fall of 2008. We started to see the beginning signs of that in 2007. And so in October of 2007, I called all of our investors together and said, things are not acting the way that they should in a normal kind of marketing environment or a market environment. And we were paid to manage people's money. So we were the expert. We were supposed to be able to kind of, no matter what the weather, we should be able to perform. And I said, quite honestly, guys, we cannot continue the way that we have done business for the last 3 or 4 years going forward. It's just number one, it won't work, and quite frankly, it's against our fiduciary duty of doing the right thing for you to just ignore these warning signs and continue going 100 miles an hour. And so I said, you pay us very handsomely to manage your capital, so we'll waive our fees, but keep your money with us, and when things kind of normalize, we'll jump back into the market. Or option two is you can take your money back. And 98% of our investors said, you guys have lost your touch. You're completely wrong. Everyone else I talk to says the market is fine. We're going to keep going. And so December 31 of 2007, we gave back $349 million of capital, wound up dissolved the company, wound down operations, the whole 9 yards. And then basically September of 2008, the financial world proverbially fell apart, and we were proven right. So, it's one of those things that, the easy decision would have been, we got paid a percentage of the money we managed, which was like 2% of $300 million is a lot of money. And we could have just said, you know what, guys, this is our time. Let's just keep clipping coupons and stacking cash. And we decided not to do that. And that decision both was painful and redeeming all at the same time.
Yeah, that comes to the courage aspect, right? Like, no one that's listened before hasn't heard this before, which is like, I try to teach people that courage is doing the right thing despite your fears, right? That's why courage is a bit of a virtue, right? It's about doing the greater good over the lesser good. And those are the hard ones, right? Like, no one else is seeing it. It's the right thing to do as you see it. And then there's this headwind that's just, doesn't want to hear it. So it sounds like you picked the lesser of two evils that, maybe your clients didn't know at the time, but they probably felt it later, especially if they sat in or whatever. So what do you think you're most proud of, of all you've accomplished?
So I'm a father of 3 kids. And I think as I sit today, I'm probably most proud of the fact that I have built multiple businesses on my own terms. I coach my daughter's lacrosse teams. I've never missed a game. And so I think I'm probably most proud of the fact that I did it on my own terms. As far as building a business is concerned, my proudest moment probably was in college. I started a late night snack delivery business that we went from idea to live in about 24 hours. Went to school in Washington, D.C. And so we from 11 p.m. to 3 a.m. We would deliver cookies and ice cream and stuff to college kids on bikes. And it taught me a lot about marketing. It taught me a lot about, meeting demand where it is. And I think at the time it was probably one of the most exciting and fun times of anything I've built, because it was just so authentic. And it, for me, showed the way I get the best out of myself is to be working with a team. And I love the kind of group environment of I can do well by having others around me that we can collectively, raise the bar.
So then when you saw Uber Eats, you're like, I'm all in. This is,
this works. It ended up being, there was I love the, maybe I should have been smarter at the time and gone from bikes to cars, but didn't make that leap. But, at the time it was, went to school in DC and everything shut down at 11 o'clock. And we said, I went to George Washington University. And so, there's thousands of college kids that are like, I want something, but nowhere to go. And so we created an on-demand delivery service on bikes. So we would, from order to delivery, was 7 minutes on average. So you could call us on the way back from the bars, and we'd be waiting at your door. And the marketing lesson that we learned at that time was we gave a free condom with every order. And so we became the guys that you could order from, and it worked phenomenally well. Word spread
That's
like
hilarious.
wildfire. So it proved to me very early on that a great hook or a great marketing idea can propel any business very, very quite far forward.
That attention grabber. Well, I mean, so with some of the businesses that you created or maybe that you have invested in, like what what are you looking for? Or maybe what, like, that's a great idea, right? You mentioned earlier, like a business is a little bit like a piece of art. Like, when do you know you've got one? You're like, yeah, this is it. This is the one. I like this. So, like, what, any kind of like differentiators in your head or the way you're looking at things and business ideas?
So I like to look at kind of macro terms are businesses that have right now that are more recession proof and have a tailwind. So those are, I always like to look at kind of expanding markets, and I think services right now is a place that I see, a lot of opportunity. That's just my wheelhouse, so I try to stick to my wheelhouse. And then on the other side, I look at things where I can help because I become a partner in the business, and I like working with founders and business owners, CEOs who I can feel that kind of partnership relationship with, and so a place that I can bring my expertise and my network primarily are the ones that I'm looking at because once there's can't remember if it was Warren Buffett or Charlie Munger said compounding is the eighth wonder of the world.
Mm.
And those that basically recognize it benefit from it, and those that don't do it at their own peril. I try to align everything I do to be to compound on each other. So if I take on a coaching client, I want to be able to bring more than just be another kind of face that they can call or talk to. I help try to bring more than that to the table, and it's worked very, very well. And I think we collectively should all be thinking about how do we leverage each of those opportunities, everything we do, to be able to get more out of it than we otherwise would.
Yeah, that's the whole 1 + 1 = 3, right? That when you can, whole Captain Planet it, right? With our powers combined, right? Like, you get in
Yeah.
there and because you're working together in partnership, and that was my experience too. Like my first, not my first partnership, but we merged with a shop up in New York, and it was that, because even as a business owner, I got to shed hats, right? It was two
Hmm.
partners. We merged with other company. It was two partners, and we got to shed our hats and get hyper focused and like maximize like the best thing that we could contribute, and it's a beautiful thing. But how do you know what does a good partner look like? I guess, when it comes to, like, because a lot of people like start a business, like, I got to have a partner. When do you need a
Yeah.
partner? When don't you need a partner?
Yeah. So I've failed at this. So let me give you my kind of retrospective. I think partnerships naturally occur around, or they naturally occur around common interest, right? So if you and I both loved something in particular, and we both kind of, mind melded over the kind of a singular interest, on, and then we're like, hey, we both like the same things. Like, let's go start a business together. That is usually the manifestation of we have similar views, we have similar skill sets, we have similar things to bring to the table. And so what happens is a business has needs regardless of the founder's desire or kind of thoughts around it, right? A business has to do marketing, it has to operate, it has to do all the sell and all of these things. Well, if you and I both love technology, right? So we're going to go, we're going to code all day long, and that's who's going to operate it, who's going to do legal, who's going to pay payroll, who's going to sell, who's going to market. The business has those needs regardless of what you bring to the table, right? So a lot of partnerships I think are failed from the beginning because there's too much overlap
Hmm.
and not enough forethought as to say, if you're going to bring on a partner, you should bring something to the table. They should bring something to the table. And that 1+1=3 concept has to be what, you know, what is created out of that synergy, right? If you have too much overlap, it ends up being, well, okay, if we both like sales, well, who's doing the selling? And if you're not doing the selling, then what else are you going to do? Because we already know that's not something you're interested in. So that's where they typically break down. So I like trying to find. People are attracted to me because of my background and some of the things I've accomplished, but they're typically practitioners. So I have one client right now who's doing phenomenally well. He's blowing up on social media, and he's like, "This is my first business. So I just want to do content and I want to manage the product. Everything else, I have no idea and I don't even want to think about it." Like, awesome. I don't want to be the front of the house guy. I am not so we have very complementary views. And so it becomes very clear who's responsible for what. And our overlap is where the business has really improved. So things like that. I try to look at opportunities where my addition is complementary to the other founder or founders.
Do you think also, how hard is it? Because doesn't it come into play also when it's like, who is ultimately in charge, right? Like, so who's the CEO, right? Who's the, when it's that, how do you recommend like partners figure that out? Like who gets the final say and things like that?
So a couple of different things there. So who has the final say is a tough one, because let's say it's, you and I start a business together and we go, hey, let's just split it down the middle. First of all, never do a 50-50 partnership, ever. You will be locked in stalemates for as long as, for eternity. But the idea of kind of like who is leading a business primarily is led by, in my opinion, the person who has the greatest ability to see kind of the 360 view. And typically that in the beginning, especially, skews towards marketing and sales. Who can understand the marketplace and things like that? Because you can hire a good COO, you can hire a good CFO, but businesses pretty much live or die on the market fit and the product suite. So that's just generally where I would kind of draw the line. But yeah, your traits, of course, matter a lot in this. And so you should establish those things first. And if you feel like you're confused on those, you hire a mentor to help kind of sort through it. And because someone needs to be in that seat definitively. And, if one person is not responsible, or everyone's responsible, no one's responsible. So somebody does need to fill that role specifically.
Yeah. And that's what I was hoping you were going to say, right? Because I just come across folks all the time, especially in that entrepreneurial stage where they're trying to get started and they've got this great idea and this vision and they go, and I'm going to get John to partner with me. And I go, why? Well, we've been best friends since middle school, but why? And we're going to be 50-50 partners. And and I always start to like just challenge, like, what are you solving for? Because I found a lot of that sometimes just they want the good old buddy system to kind of help be a backstop. And I'm glad you point out like the 50-50 point, right? Because that's just it. I've kind of seen this situation where I've told folks like, hey, you're the one with the vision. You're the one with the idea. You don't need a partner. You need resources, right? Like, cause that's what you've been saying, right? You've got this great idea and you're the widget maker and that's all you want to do. Like, you don't need to go partner with a COO or whatever per se. You need a COO, right? You need that resource. You don't need necessarily a partner. And I'm overstepping the fact that there's different strategies like profit interest and stuff that you can get people, engaged, with the reward of the work. But you don't need to kind of go, hey, I need a 50-50 partner, because to this point, like at the end of the day, I agree. Someone's got to be the one that everyone agrees, like the buck stops with you. Like, we might all disagree, but you've got the say and you're going to own it, right? Like, you've got the final say. And because you're right, when that clarity is not established early, the problem is that lack of clarity rears its ugly head at difficult times. And, those roots and tentacles might be a little too deep that makes it comfortable to kind of sort that stuff out easily.
Yeah, and when done well, it ends up being quite additive in the tradition, in the true sense. So Alex and Leila Hormozi over at GymLaunch, I had the great honor of working alongside both of them. Alex was a sales and marketing and product vision guy, and Leila was the ops, legal, HR, finance, things like that. So, if you actually look at it, you could say, is one more important than the other? Really not. And by having the two of them be equally strong, they actually, Alex would push Leila, Leila would push Alex, but the company collectively never did anything until we had alignment.
Yep.
We'd battle, as in the military sense, it's like all the arguments happened behind the scenes, but once we left the room, it was like, any unspent shells? All right, this is what we disagree, we agree on. This is what we collectively agreed on. So there was all of that discussion and that's the way it should work. And that's how we got the best out of everybody on the team.
Yeah, because you're talking about accountability, right? Personally, I've not really, and I get it. And then I also say, look, I don't care what my title is. I don't care what your title is. I care what I'm accountable for, what I'm responsible for, and what you're accountable and responsible for. If we are clear on that, like, you can call yourself Popsicle Man, I don't care, because I just need to know what you're responsible for, so that when it comes to that area, we can all turn to you, and we all know, like, hey man, that's Tim's area. That's got to go to him. That he owns that, because sometimes the titles don't do it. It's just like you said with Alex and Leila. It's who's accountable for what, and that's the dividing lines. And now it's real clear. Like, hey, well, that sounds like a sales thing to me. Talk to Alex. He's got the final say on that. And then you still, everyone kind of appreciates that. And then you kind of got this circle of trust around you that people will, and that's what I loved about my partnership with the core four of us at Corsica, was that there was that. It's like, hey, Dale, I've got opinion. Here's my opinion, but the decision's yours, or vice versa, right? Yeah. We all gave our constructive feedback, and I'll go so far to like be hoity-toity here and say it was out of love. Like, we're all rowing in the same direction, right? It wasn't a ego Absolutely. Thing, or it wasn't like I want to see it my way. Which I saw, when we sold and kind of leveled up and got a lot more, cooks in the kitchen, I saw a lot more of that, which was new, that people just wanted their stamp on things, good, bad, or indifferent. It became more about ego, which I didn't like. And I knew it didn't work coming from like an environment where four of us all agreed, like, who's accountable for what. And we all respect that, because we know that person's working in the interest of the whole. And so yeah, it sounds like you're talking, just be clear about the accountabilities and let the things fall where they may.
Yeah, I think there's also a tremendous culture piece to this, right? So do you have the type of organization that the title gets in the way of the collective benefit of the business? So, you might be familiar with Bridgewater Associates, the largest hedge fund in the world, hundreds of billions of dollars under management. Ray Dalio, as former CEO, they have a culture of radical transparency and meritocracy. So you can be the newest guy, lowest guy on the totem pole, but the best idea wins. And the culture of the business going in, and they screen for this, is everybody's this radical transparency idea is like, good, bad, or indifferent, you're going to play it straight. And I think so many businesses get caught up in, and this has been hard for me to get to. It's like, you have to put yourself in that. You have to, as a CEO, you have to create the space for that to be the way things operate and reinforce those core tenets. But then for folks coming onto the team, it becomes very clear very quickly whether they are a culture fit, not in the kind of, do they like, free snack Friday? It's, is this the type of person who can own a mistake? Are they the type of person who can challenge leadership? Like, if those things matter to you, and I think many business owners, especially in the smaller end of the spectrum, don't pay as much attention to that. But I think it's critically important, especially early on, when when everybody's got to be rowing in the same direction. I would have spent more time thinking about that, communicating it, than I probably did in some of the companies that I founded. And what happens otherwise is you get a morass of people doing different things in different ways, and nobody really knows kind of what's going on.
Yeah, and what the ultimate name, I'm kind of sucked up in the rat race
Yep.
of the business, and that's where, when we were talking about earlier, like, these the person, someone's ultimately, even if you stay that widget maker, like someone's still got to be like that visionary role, right? Someone's still got to be calling
Mhm.
out, like, here's our North Star, like this is why we exist, right?
Yeah.
And kind of, and I don't know if that's the founder, or the founder kind of delegates that, or is a combination of the founder with their, their collective of resources that are helping kind of see the light and build a combined vision. But that's it. Like, there's got to be an ultimate vision that everyone knows they're working towards, and that's a multi-headed beast too, because sometimes it's not just mission, like, oh, we're aiming towards $3 million this year, or a certain market, but it's also like, what is your vision of the culture, right? So that you can
Mhm.
screen topics and issues like, hey, this is how we're going to look culturally as an organization, so that you can kind of help use that to filter what's right and wrong in these decisions of right and wrong and wrong. You're like, hey, well, how does this fit in our core values, and how does this fit to our financial goals? How does this fit towards our target market?
Mhm.
And getting kind of clarity there, and kind of that leadership team and that visionary kind of helping, bring that stuff to light, so that, like you said, the team is all kind of rowing in the same direction. And if they know what that stuff is, they can, they can even day to day, use in the military, that's the commander's intent, right? Like, leverage the
Mhm.
commander's intent to know kind of what their focus is, or, so on and so forth.
Yeah, one of the first exercises I do with clients is I'll ask, if they've got a team, I ask everybody on the team to the same questions. And your expectation would be things like, what's the most important thing in the business today? Answers were always different. How do we quantify success? Sales? Is it calls? Is it impressions? Is it like, so what is it? What are we trying to do here?
Yeah.
And then to your point, where's the business going in 5 years? You got to, you get on a time machine, get out 5 years from now and look back, look around. What is the business? And when you start to kind of pull apart, like, oh, I didn't clearly communicate that this new initiative, like for me as a uh, CEO, I always liked, I was always pushing product, pushing the product development, what else do we need to do, things like that. And every time I had a new idea, I'd go and talk to our team about it. And quite frankly, towards the end, one of my leads, we had physical locations. She just came up to me and said, "Can you just leave? Like, we're good. I'm going to fire you from your job because every single time you come in and kind of rock the boat, we don't know what we're supposed to do. Is it the new idea? Is it the old idea? What are we doing?" And so and the marker for this is if your team rolls their eyes when you said, I just came back from a conference and I've got lists of stuff to do. If your team groans or rolls their eyes, you might be this person. So, I've learned that I need to be it's like that old adage, what you say is heard with a megaphone, and, what you do is under a microscope. It is
Mm-hmm.
very true. And
Oh yeah.
it's those little inaccuracies that you may not even be aware of that are communicating something that you may not intend.
Yeah. So one thing I wanted to touch back on before we kind of wrap up here is, when you're talking about the things you're most proud of, talk to me a little bit about, like, what business owners, entrepreneurs, and folks that are trying to grow, like, what do they need to know as far as that dichotomy of, the work, and I'll say what you're doing it for, hopefully, outside of work and family and so on.
Yeah, I believe that that I'm here personally to be able to help give back to those that are coming now after me, based on the 20 years of my career that I've had. I've realized that doing more has seldomly actually pushed the business or myself forward. So now I actually spend more time on actually thinking, and the soft side, which I used to think was just for people that had too much time on their hands. And so doing less but doing more things. It's like that 95-5 principle or the Pareto principle. If you don't know what the 20% that moves the 80% is, you probably have to take a step back because you're wasting a lot of time. And I think I was more like, let's just get to work and do more work. That's not the lever. And so I'm particularly proud of the fact that I've kind of come through that. The sacrifices, of I have no visions of trying to be a billionaire and all of those types of things. I just believe that if I can do right by my family and package up the things that I've learned along the way, that everything else will kind of take care of itself. But yeah, it's I've built small companies. I've got in 8 and 9 figure companies, and it's the lessons that I've learned. If I can give any guidance to anyone who's just starting, find someone who's been there before. Find a mentorship group, find a mentor, find a mastermind, think about not what you need to know, but who you need to know. Is probably the best advice I can give anybody who's just starting out.
Yeah, because there are some serious blind spots.
that you don't know what you don't know, right?
Yeah.
and you can spend years in the wrong direction, and then it's better to just to be vulnerable, and honest about where you are, what you know, what you don't. The sooner you do that, the further you'll go.
Yep, your network will grow really quick too as a result of it.
Absolutely.
Cool, Tim. Well, thanks for coming on. How can people find more information about you and the things that you're doing?
Yeah, Instagram, tim.calise. That's tim.calise. Also, my website, timcalise.com. I have a phenomenal group of entrepreneurs and business owners in our community. There's no cost to it. So if you go to timcalise.com/VIP, you can get on that and be kind of part of that community. We're dropping good information, valuable nuggets all week long via email us. So we look forward to having anybody join us there.
Awesome. I love it. No, we need it, man. And this day and age, especially just technology has kind of created this wave of entrepreneurs and folks like getting in business. So there's a ton of blind spots. So, I appreciate guys like you out there helping fight the good fight and help folks kind of, because it's hard, but it's a good kind of hard, but you got to grow and hear these lessons from mentors, like you say. So that's awesome. So Tim, man, it's been an honor having you on and hearing about what you're doing and sharing some of those insights, man. So I appreciate you coming on and those that you serve, and look forward to talking to you again real soon.
Thanks so much, Dale. Appreciate it very much.